Racist judge mocks black woman for fighting back. Stunned to find out she's an undercover FBI agent. A tense silence settled over the small-town courtroom as the heavy doors creaked open. A poised yet unassuming black woman stepped inside, dressed in a simple navy blue suit. She advanced confidently toward the bench, her presence immediately drawing the skeptical gaze of the judge, a man who exuded smug authority. From the moment their eyes met, his condescending glare issued an unspoken challenge to anyone who dared question his power. At stake was more than just a legal ruling. Her freedom, her very identity. What no one in the room suspected was that they stood before a force capable of shattering their assumptions. In this clash of arrogance and quiet resolve, an explosive truth was about to come to light, one that would unleash a storm of consequences like no other. Nestled in the sleepy heart of Pinewood County, where towering pines swayed beneath an overcast sky, life was expected to pass predictably. The courthouse itself was modest, an old two-story brick structure, its metal lettering above the entrance dulled with age, reading Pinewood County Court. Inside, dim corridors flickered under buzzing fluorescent lights, the air carrying a faint mix of lemon disinfectant and decades of tension. Portraits of past judges lined the walls, an unbroken sequence of stern white faces staring down at all who entered. On this drizzly morning, the usual hush was disrupted by the shuffle of attorneys and the slow, deliberate steps of bailiffs making their rounds. The wooden benches in the gallery were filled with curious locals, drawn in by the promise of something more riveting than the routine property disputes and minor theft cases that typically occupied the court's docket. Inside Courtroom B, the musty air bristled with anticipation. At the front of the room sat Judge Roland Harrington, a towering man with thinning silver hair, meticulously combed to the side. He wore his black robe like a badge of destiny, as if justice itself was his personal domain. Some in town considered him brilliant, a man devoted to the law. Others murmured that his ego was as vast as the ancient oak standing outside the courthouse doors. He had a habit of snapping off his reading glasses whenever he wished to punctuate a point, a mannerism that had become infamous among the local legal community. At the defendant's table sat a black woman in a navy suit, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. Her name was Simone Johnson, though few in the room understood the true significance of her presence. To the onlookers, she was merely a woman preparing to represent herself, a fact that alone caused a stir. The sight of a defendant waiving their right to an attorney was rare in Pinewood County. Rarer still was one who carried herself with such quiet certainty. Judge Harrington's gaze swept over Simone with a casual dismissiveness, a gesture subtle enough to go unnoticed by most. But she caught it. She had seen that look before, from men who thought they could size up her worth in an instant. Men who assumed the law bent to their will so long as it served their own ends. Beneath the facade of legal formalities, she recognized something more insidious, a flicker of prejudice, the arch of an eyebrow, the slight downturn at the corners of his mouth, the hint of disdain woven into his every movement. Officially, Simone stood accused of assault. Unofficially, her presence in Pinewood County had little to do with that charge. She hadn't come here by choice, not in the sense of standing before the judge as a defendant. But necessity had forced her hand. Her true purpose had to remain hidden. She had to play the role of an ordinary citizen on trial, maintain the illusion, and safeguard a secret that could not be revealed too soon. Because no one in this quiet town had the faintest idea they were looking at an undercover FBI agent. At the prosecution's table sat Felicia Marks, a seasoned district attorney with short auburn hair and a relentless reputation. She had built her case around accusations that Simone had attacked a prominent local businessman, Robert Croton, a real estate mogul with deep ties in Pinewood County. According to the official record, Simone had struck Croton outside the Barrington Motel following a dispute. The charge? Assault with intent to cause harm. The state was prepared to pursue her with unwavering determination. As the proceedings began, the gallery's murmurs died to a low hum. Judge Harrington rapped his gavel against the bench, his voice cutting through the room as he called for order. The authority in his tone ricocheted off the wood-paneled walls. Simone rose as he asked if she was prepared to proceed with her defense. With calm assurance, she nodded. She neither fidgeted nor faltered. This moment had been meticulously prepared for. Still, the tension in the room was unmistakable. No one else in that courtroom could have guessed that Simone was here for something far greater than her own defense. For over 3 months, she had operated undercover in Pinewood County, investigating a sprawling corruption ring entangled in money laundering, illegal land deals, and human trafficking. The FBI had turned its attention to Pinewood after uncovering clues linking the town to a broader, more sinister network. Robert Croton was just one thread in a much larger web stretching across state lines. If Simone's cover was exposed prematurely, the entire operation could collapse. Every step she took had to be deliberate, every move calculated. Yet here she stood, facing a judge whose disdain extended beyond the charge against her. His expression all but confirmed that her race and unwavering composure had already provoked a silent prejudice. The only question was, how far would that prejudice take him? Simone inhaled slowly, her gaze sweeping across the room. She recognized the tension in the air, the way the overhead lights illuminated floating dust particles, the expectant hush of an audience waiting for a spectacle. She had trained for this moment. The years at Quantico, the endless drills in reading micro-expressions, in detecting the unspoken thoughts hidden in the flicker of an eye, the tightening of a jaw. She saw it now. Judge Harrington had already decided who she was. A troublemaker, an upstart, perhaps worse. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze without hesitation. "Your Honor, I'm ready," she said, her voice steady, polite, and carrying a quiet strength that held the entire room captive. Harrington arched an eyebrow, skepticism flickering in his cold, assessing eyes. But Simone Johnson was far from the woman he assumed her to be, and soon enough he would find out just how wrong he was. To Judge Harrington, Simone was nothing more than an arrogant defendant who believed herself above the law. If only he knew the truth, how far she stood above his petty scorn. The game was about to begin, and Simone felt a mix of exasperation and dark amusement swirl within her. She hadn't come to outwit the judge, but she was more than prepared for whatever obstacles he placed in her path. Because beyond the simple matter of guilt or innocence, a much larger conspiracy was unfolding. One that could consume them both if they weren't careful. And so, with the sharp screech of chairs scraping against the polished floor, the stage was set. The first act of this extraordinary legal battle was about to begin. In the charged silence that followed, it was almost possible to feel the unseen forces of fate twisting and coiling, bracing for the storm ahead. From the very start of the trial, Judge Harrington's approach toward Simone was steeped in veiled contempt. The first sign was his constant interruptions. Each time Simone attempted to present a point, he was quick to interject with pedantic remarks, questioning her grasp of even the most elementary legal procedures. At first, it could have been mistaken for simple clarification, perhaps a routine check to ensure she understood courtroom protocol. But as the trial progressed, his tone sharpened, growing more pointed, until it teetered on the edge of outright disdain. "You say you're representing yourself, Miss Johnson?" he asked at one point, leaning forward with an air of skepticism. His cold blue eyes peered at her over the rim of his half-moon glasses. "Are you certain you understand the full ramifications of your decision?" A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. "I am well aware of my constitutional rights, Your Honor," Simone responded evenly. She ensured her voice remained steady, polite, but firm enough to make it clear she was no naive amateur. "I'm prepared," Harrington responded with a slow, pompous nod. "We'll see," he said, tapping a pen against the bench. "We'll see if you're truly prepared or if this is simply a misunderstanding of legal complexities." A murmur rippled through the gallery, and a few spectators exchanged wary glances. Some shook their heads at the judge's tone, but his reputation as a staunch, old-school authoritarian had been cemented long ago. Few dared to challenge him, at least not with success. Locals often joked that Harrington ran his courtroom like a personal fiefdom, complete with antiquated traditions and public humiliations for those who disappointed him. Meanwhile, District Attorney Felicia Marks maintained a neutral, almost apologetic expression each time the judge taunted Simone. She had a job to do, prosecute the alleged crime, but even she could see that Harrington was crossing a line. Felicia was a professional who believed in the integrity of the legal process. Mercy wasn't her strong suit, but she had spent enough years in the field to recognize when a judge's bias was beginning to overshadow the proceedings. Even so, she had built a strong case, and she wouldn't risk jeopardizing it by stepping out of line. Midway through the second day of the trial, Simone presented a crucial piece of evidence, one she believed would exonerate her or at the very least shift the burden of proof onto the prosecution. She had obtained security camera footage from the entrance of the Barrington Motel, capturing a brief yet critical moment. Robert Croton initiating physical contact. In the grainy footage, Croton's hand could be seen latching onto her wrist before she struck him in response. It was a key detail, one that could entirely reshape the jury's perspective. Instead of an unprovoked assault, the video suggested self-defense. Judge Harrington barely glanced at the screen before dismissing it outright. "Miss Johnson," he said coolly, "I find this footage inconclusive. The resolution is poor, and it is difficult to determine the precise nature of the contact." Simone's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, you can clearly see Mr. Croton's hand gripping my arm. If you follow, do not interrupt me," Harrington snapped, removing his glasses with deliberate slowness. The entire courtroom tensed. "You are not an attorney, yet you behave as though you possess an intimate knowledge of evidentiary procedure," he continued. "This clip is barely 2 seconds long. Anything could have occurred before or after this isolated moment. A single frame of time does not equate to proof of innocence. You would do well to be cautious about presenting such incomplete fragments in my courtroom." A muffled snicker echoed from somewhere in the gallery. Simone turned slightly, scanning the room for the culprit, feeling a surge of heat creep up her neck. But she refused to show any sign of frustration. Instead, she took a slow, steady breath, tightening her grip on the edges of the defendant's table. She had endured far worse indignities in the field. This was just another test. Judge Harrington continued his condescending lecture, explaining courtroom procedure as if she were an unruly student in need of correction. "I realize you may lack the benefit of a law degree, Miss Johnson," he added with a faintly patronizing smile. "But in my courtroom, partial evidence and speculation will not suffice. Do you understand?" A flicker of irritation crossed Simone's face. This wasn't just condescension, it was an attempt at public humiliation. Ordinarily, she might have countered with a precise legal reference, enough to undercut his authority without overstepping. But that would be a dangerous mistake. She wasn't supposed to be a legal expert. She was supposed to be an ordinary woman, unfamiliar with courtroom intricacies. So she swallowed her pride and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied softly. Across the aisle, Felicia Marks studied the footage with a more thoughtful expression. She didn't argue the judge's ruling, but Simone could tell she was making a mental note. Felicia might have been determined to secure a conviction, but she wasn't blind to Croton's questionable behavior. The path to uncovering Simone's true motives, her real identity, was still long. But for those sharp enough to see, the puzzle pieces were slowly beginning to fall into place. During the lunch recess, Simone stepped outside into the courthouse's damp courtyard. A light drizzle kissed her skin as she took in the gray sky overhead. She found a quiet bench, pulled out her phone, and checked her messages. A single message from a blocked number read, "We're close to finalizing the operation. Continue as planned." Simone stiffened. This signaled that the bureau was ready to move, possibly soon. She would have to maintain her composure. Any mistake in front of Harrington or the prosecution could jeopardize everything. She sat still, replaying the judge's words in her mind. Who was Harrington to question her intelligence? She had excelled at the FBI Academy in Quantico, a globally renowned institution known for its rigorous training, where her abilities in quick analysis, unshakable composure, and empathy were tested and honed. The judge mocked her ignorance, ironically unaware of the staggering truth of her identity. Deep down, Simone longed to deliver a sharp retort, but she knew the importance of her role here. Her operation in Pinewood County wasn't just about exposing corrupt local officials. It was tied to a much larger federal investigation. The corruption involving Robert Croton, and potentially others in the county's hierarchy, could trigger a chain of indictments stretching across state lines. She couldn't risk revealing who she truly was yet. The mission required secrecy, even if it meant enduring racial undertones and public humiliation in the courtroom. So be it. The judge's mockery would soon be forgotten if the operation succeeded. For now, Simone had to let the insults slide off her shoulders, just as the raindrops slid off her coat. With that thought, she returned to the building, steeling herself for another round of taunts from a judge who believed her incompetent. She had no intention of letting him break her. After all, the time would come when the illusions would collapse, and the truth would be exposed for all to see, even Judge Harrington. Little did he know, his condescending attitude was sowing the seeds of his own downfall, and that moment was rapidly approaching. Outside the courtroom drama, Pinewood County presented itself as the epitome of a small American town, family-owned diners serving the best cherry pie this side of the Mississippi, a charming main street lined with boutique shops, and a local community theater putting on an amateur production of our town once a year. Tourists passing through might find it picturesque, even idyllic. But beneath the surface, dark secrets lay hidden like the shadowy pine forests that surrounded the town. As the trial progressed, Simone delved deeper into Pinewood's underbelly during her free time. Officially, she was a defendant fighting to clear her name. Privately, her mission was far more intricate. She contacted confidential sources, locals who had grown weary of the corruption and exploitation flourishing beneath the town's veneer. One of these sources was Miriam Perry, a quiet, middle-aged librarian who had quietly documented shady land deals orchestrated by Robert Croton. Miriam believed these deals were just the tip of the iceberg, connected to a larger network of criminal enterprises reaching all the way to the southern border. When Simone met Miriam in the back aisle of the Pinewood Library, hidden between tall shelves of old, yellowing books, Miriam revealed details of transactions that painted a chilling picture. Properties were being purchased at unusually low prices, local officials were signing off on dubious permits, and entire neighborhoods were being torn down for so-called developments that never came to fruition. Somewhere along the way, Simone realized money was being laundered through these real estate schemes. "Everyone's too scared to speak out," Miriam whispered, glancing nervously around, certain that hidden cameras were watching them. "Croton's got friends in high places, the sheriff, the mayor, even some people at the county records office. I've seen the intimidation tactics. People who protest just vanish when the police investigate. They call it a runaway case. No real leads, but no one dares to stand up to him." Simone nodded with empathy, gently placing her hand on Miriam's trembling fingers. She had to be careful not to give away too much of her real purpose. "I appreciate your bravery," Simone said quietly. "We'll find a way to make this right. All I need is the chain of evidence, something that will stand up to scrutiny." Miriam handed over a folder containing photocopied documents, signatures, bank statements with redacted names, property transfer logs. Simone thanked her, promising to keep her identity confidential, before slipping out the back door of the library. She felt the weight of the looming confrontation ahead. She was balancing a delicate situation: a defendant on trial for assault and an undercover FBI agent uncovering evidence of a criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, a biased judge was orchestrating a courtroom spectacle designed to undermine her credibility. In a shadowy corner of Pinewood's only coffee shop, Simone pored over the contents of the folder. The deeper she looked, the clearer it became. Robert Croton wasn't just a dishonest businessman. He was a key player in a far-reaching criminal operation. The corruption had deep roots, and Pinewood County seemed to be a critical hub. But how far did it go? Was Judge Harrington involved? Had he accepted bribes or turned a blind eye to Croton's dealings? His hostility in court could be explained by his desire to ruin Simone's credibility before she could expose everything. The next day's court session began with a burst of energy. District Attorney Felicia Marks called Robert Croton to the witness stand to give his version of events. Croton strode to the stand in a sharp gray suit, a smug expression on his face. He cast a quick, malicious glance at Simone, as if to say, "I've already won." Croton proceeded to recount a dramatic account of Simone attacking him without provocation, painting himself as a concerned businessman. He claimed to have merely asked her to leave his property, feigning shock as he accused Simone of attacking him without provocation. His performance was more suited to an amateur actor, full of exaggerated gestures and self-righteous indignation. Simone, aware of her fragile position, conducted her cross-examination with care. She highlighted discrepancies in his timeline, making him contradict himself. For instance, he initially said the altercation occurred near the motel parking lot, only to later assert they had exchanged words in the lobby. His recollection of the time was also inconsistent. One moment he said it happened late in the evening, and in another he claimed it was early afternoon. Each slip created a small crack in his facade of victimhood. Judge Harrington, however, intervened repeatedly to halt Simone's questions. He accused her of leading the witness or dwelling on insignificant details. The more Simone pressed Croton, the more the judge's patience seemed to thin, as though each clarifying question Simone posed personally offended him. At one point, when Simone caught Croton in a direct lie about whether a security guard was on duty that day, the judge abruptly called for a recess, denying her the chance to continue questioning. The tension in the courtroom rose, and the audience shifted uneasily, sensing that Simone was on the verge of exposing something. Yet, the judge refused to let her pursue it. Whispers began circulating in the gallery. Was the judge biased in favor of Croton? As Simone stood by the defendant's table, sorting through her notes, her heart raced with the burning sense of injustice in the air. But beneath that frustration was a surge of determination. The judge's efforts to silence her only solidified her suspicions. There was a reason he wanted her quiet. Sometimes bias was just bias, but at other times, it concealed a deeper corruption. For now, she maintained her composure, following the judge's orders. But the moment he banged his gavel to signal the recess, Simone quickly stepped into the corridor to make a discreet phone call to her bureau contact. She relayed a coded message, noting that Croton was lying under oath and that she suspected the judge might be complicit. On the other end, she received instructions to hold her ground and continue gathering evidence. If the judge's corruption could be proven, it would only strengthen the case, so caution was paramount. After ending the call, Simone adjusted her jacket and returned to the courtroom. As she passed Croton, she noticed the mix of contempt and smugness in his gaze. Her eyes narrowed. She had dealt with criminals and corrupt officials before, but there was something chilling about Croton's blatant swagger. He carried himself like a man who believed he could do anything and avoid consequences. Simone refused to back down. She had come to Pinewood to dismantle a house of lies, and if that meant defending herself while unearthing a multi-state conspiracy, then so be it. She would cling to her composure and continue playing her role until the day came when Judge Harrington, Robert Croton, and anyone else involved in the operation would be forced to confront the truth. After a particularly trying morning session, where Judge Harrington had once again belittled Simone and dismissed a crucial witness she attempted to call, she found herself in a quiet hallway on the second floor of the courthouse. The soft hum of a vending machine was the only sound in the otherwise empty space. She leaned against the worn wooden railing, head bowed, breathing deeply to calm herself. So far, the trial felt like a joke. No matter how rational or sound her arguments were, the judge found ways to reject or downplay them. One part of her longed to rip off the mask and reveal her FBI badge, putting Harrington in his place, but doing so would blow months of meticulous planning. The operation came first. Her mind wandered back to her time at the FBI Academy. She remembered the crisp air of the sprawling Quantico campus, the chill biting at her cheeks during endurance runs. She recalled the camaraderie among her classmates, the intense training in interrogation techniques, evidence analysis, and infiltration strategies. She had excelled in every aspect, rising to the top of her class, but none of that training had prepared her for the emotional toll of being ridiculed in a courtroom, forced to appear incompetent when she was, in fact, more qualified than most of the attorneys in the room. She inhaled deeply, recalling the vow she had made to herself, to protect and serve. This mission was about more than just her self-respect. It was about ensuring Robert Croton's sprawling criminal empire finally faced justice. It was about the families who had lost their homes, the neighbors who had disappeared, and the future victims who could be saved if she succeeded. She heard footsteps and opened her eyes, seeing a familiar face from earlier in the trial. Felicia Marks, the district attorney. Marks approached quietly, her expression conflicted, clutching a manila folder in her hand. Simone straightened, bracing herself for a confrontation. Perhaps more intimidation or some clever attempt to corner her. Instead, Marks gestured for Simone to follow her into a small lounge area where a tired coffee maker hummed in protest. "I'm not supposed to talk to you outside the courtroom," Marks began, lowering her voice, "but I need you to hear something off the record." She glanced around, ensuring no one else was nearby. Simone raised an eyebrow.
"I'm listening."
Marks pursed her lips, looking unsure. "I'm aware the judge is being unusually harsh with you. I don't condone his behavior, and I'm not blind to the possibility that something bigger is at play here. But I have a job to do. I took an oath too. I have to prosecute when I believe a crime's been committed." "Understood," Simone replied carefully, her eyes scanning Marks's body language. She seemed sincere, perhaps even burdened by guilt. "Why tell me this now?" Marks exhaled, lowering her voice. "Because the evidence I've gathered suggests you were at the Barrington Motel under questionable circumstances, not just for the assault. We know you've been in contact with some locals who are investigating Croton. The question is why?" Simone's heart raced, but she kept her expression neutral. "I've told you. I was there minding my own business. Croton confronted me." Marks nodded briefly, neither confirming nor denying. "Look, Miss Johnson, Judge Harrington is pushing this case to move too quickly. He's pressuring me to secure a conviction fast, which is unusual for a judge who usually hears both sides. It's like he wants your trial wrapped up yesterday." Simone's eyes flickered. "And you're suspecting what exactly?" "I'm suspecting that maybe you're not the real target," Marks admitted. "Croton is known for shady deals, but he's also funded a lot of local campaigns. Harrington's campaign for the bench was largely financed by wealthy donors, including individuals linked to Croton. But proof, that's trickier." Simone felt her pulse quicken. "So, Harrington's bias wasn't just arrogance or racism, it could very well be corruption." She nodded slightly. "Is that all you came to say?" Marks hesitated. "There's a rumor that you come from a law enforcement background. Don't ask how I know, but the point is, if you really have reason to investigate Croton and his associates, maybe you can find the evidence we need. I can't help you directly, but I also can't stand by and watch an innocent person get railroaded by corrupt powers." Marks's words stunned Simone. She knew she had to be cautious. "I'm not at liberty to discuss my background," she replied softly. "Let's just say I plan to defend myself with everything I've got." "Then I hope you succeed," Marks said, her eyes sincere. "I have to maintain appearances in that courtroom, but let's just say I'm rooting for justice, however it comes." With that, she handed Simone a discreet note. "These are some contacts, people who might know more about Croton's network. Do with it what you will. If you get the evidence, I'll make sure it sees the light of day." Simone quietly accepted the note, thanking Marks. The moment felt surreal, like they were conspirators against a common enemy. But Simone understood their roles. Marks was the public face of the prosecution, bound by professional duties, while Simone was the unsuspecting defendant whose true identity could blow the case wide open. Together, they might just bring the hammer of justice down. That afternoon, returning to court, Simone felt a renewed sense of purpose. If the district attorney herself suspected something was wrong, Simone wasn't alone in her doubts about Judge Harrington's impartiality. The real question was how to expose him without compromising the FBI's ongoing investigation. When the session resumed, Harrington launched into yet another lecture, scolding Simone for calling a witness, an ex-employee of Croton, without properly informing the court in advance. Simone explained that she'd only located the witness the night before, but Harrington shot her down with a sneering claim that this wasn't trial by ambush. He effectively barred the testimony from being heard. The jurors exchanged confused looks, uncertain as to why a judge would suppress potentially important testimony. Simone caught Marks watching from the prosecution's table, her lips tight. If Harrington's bias had been subtle before, it was now glaringly obvious. The jurors might not understand the bigger picture, but even they seemed uncomfortable with the judge's one-sided rulings. Some glanced at Simone with pity, others with curiosity. The tension in the room was palpable, as thick as the dust swirling under the fluorescent lights. Outside, gray clouds gathered over Pinewood County, as though mirroring the storm about to break. Simone could feel the weight of the note in her jacket pocket, the leads from Marks, and she wondered how soon she could act on them. Exposing Croton was paramount, but bringing Harrington's suspected corruption to light would require solid evidence. Something undeniable, something neither he nor any other official could bury. Nightfall blanketed Pinewood County. In a cramped motel room on the outskirts of town, Simone hunched over a small desk cluttered with evidence. The lone overhead light flickered, casting shifting shadows on the cheap paneling. She chewed the end of a pen as she painstakingly compiled a timeline of Robert Croton's shady land acquisitions and Judge Harrington's rulings in favor of certain developers. If she could establish a pattern linking the judge's decisions to Croton's financial interests, it might be enough to expose their hidden alliance. At the broken chain link fence near the entrance, Simone spotted a figure huddled under a large coat. Her instincts told her to keep her hand near her holster. She approached slowly. "You the one who texted me?" she called softly. The figure stepped forward, revealing a wiry man with sunken cheeks and darting eyes. He introduced himself as Cole. Simone recognized the name from the note Marks had given her. Cole had once worked as a property scout for Croton before developing a conscience and quitting under suspicious circumstances. Cole's voice trembled, betraying his deep fear. "It's dangerous. You have no idea." "I've got an idea," Simone replied, stepping closer. "What can you tell me?" Cole lit a cigarette, taking a shaky puff. "Croton's laundering money through shell companies. The judge signs off on any legal disputes that challenge Croton's acquisitions, always rules in his favor. I used to be the one forging signatures on some of the property deeds." He exhaled smoke as though purging guilt from his chest. "I tried to speak up. My wife received threats in the mail, a bullet in an envelope. That's when I knew I had to get out." Simone nodded gravely. "I'm sorry." She gently pressed him for more details. "Is there proof of Harrington's involvement? Money transfers, suspicious bank deposits?" Cole nodded. "I have digital records, some I took before I ran. You'd be surprised how sloppy they got. I can't go to the cops. The sheriff's in Croton's pocket." Simone's pulse quickened. "I can protect you, but only if you hand over that evidence. It could help me blow this case wide open." Cole studied her face. "You're not just some random woman defending herself, are you?" "Trust me, Cole," she said quietly. "I'm on the side of the law." He gave a dry, humorless laugh. "All right, I'll give you the records, but you'd better promise you'll use them. I've risked everything just by meeting you." They moved into the decaying husk of the sawmill building, stepping over broken planks and twisted metal. In one corner, Cole dug through a dusty tarp and pulled out a battered laptop. After a few attempts to power it on, the screen flickered to life, displaying a folder full of incriminating files. He transferred them onto a flash drive. Simone watched the progress bar move forward, feeling both triumph and dread. This evidence could destroy the illusions protecting Croton and Harrington, but once it went public, the stakes would soar. When the transfer was complete, Cole handed Simone the flash drive, his hands shaking. "Get me out of this," he whispered. "I can't keep running." Simone placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'll do everything I can." A faint noise echoed through the building, footsteps crunching over glass. They froze. Simone quickly pocketed the flash drive and slipped her hand to her holster. "Someone's here," she whispered. Cole's eyes widened with panic. They doused the laptop screen and slid behind a half-collapsed wall. A flashlight beam swept through the darkness, scanning the interior of the sawmill. Simone's heart raced in her chest. She could hear hushed voices and footsteps as they methodically searched the place. Cole tugged at her sleeve, terror etched on his face. Simone motioned for him to stay calm as she strained to hear the intruder's words. One voice hissed, "Must be around here somewhere. Let's check that corner." Simone quickly assessed their chances. 2 or 3 men, from the sound of it, likely armed. Cole wasn't in any condition to fight back. She had only her sidearm, and her priority was to protect the witness and the evidence. A confrontation could blow her cover, but being discovered could prove deadly. She motioned for Cole to crawl quietly toward an opening in the far wall. As the footsteps came closer, Simone readied her weapon. One of the flashlight beams glinted off rusted machinery. She counted in her head 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, the intruder's phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence. One man cursed and answered it under his breath. Simone seized the distraction and silently guided Cole toward the exit. They slipped through the broken boards, their footsteps muffled by the soggy ground outside, the wind howling like a banshee. Simone didn't relax until they reached the tree line. From a safe vantage point, they saw 3 shadowy figures emerge from the building. One man was on the phone, scanning the area with his flashlight, while another glared at their surroundings, a gun glinting at his hip. After a tense moment, they retreated to a black SUV parked down the road. Its headlights flicked on and it sped off. Cole exhaled in relief, nearly collapsing. "They would have killed us." "I know." Simone nodded grimly, helping him stay upright. "I'll get you somewhere safe tonight. I know a place." With one last glance at the incriminating evidence on her laptop screen, Simone closed her eyes and let exhaustion take over. She would face Harrington in court again tomorrow, and soon, very soon, she would reveal the truth that would shake him to his core. Morning dawned on Pinewood County, the storm clouds lingering but withholding their rain. Back in the courthouse corridor, Simone went through the motions, security checks, glances from curious onlookers, silent judgments from the court officials. She held her head high, keeping her expression neutral. Deep inside, she was coiled like a spring, ready to act. District Attorney Felicia Marks looked less composed than usual, her brow furrowed with worry. Perhaps she suspected something was afoot. She caught Simone's eye across the hallway and gave a subtle nod, as if to say, "Are you ready?" Simone returned a slight nod. She was more than ready. She had spent the early morning hours confirming her plan. She had emailed the incriminating files to multiple secure FBI addresses, along with instructions to release them publicly if she became incapacitated or lost contact. She'd also shared them with Felicia in an encrypted manner, though she hadn't admitted as much to the district attorney. Now all that remained was to maneuver Harrington and Croton into a corner where they'd be forced to face the truth. When the court session resumed, Harrington arrived looking uncharacteristically tense. He wasted no time calling Simone and Felicia to approach the bench. "We're concluding this trial today," he announced, his voice echoing with forced authority. "Closing arguments will be made this afternoon, and I'll instruct the jury." Felicia began to protest, claiming that the prosecution still had more witnesses to call, but Harrington cut her off. "We've heard enough, Miss Marks. I will not allow this trial to drag on unnecessarily." Simone stared at him without flinching. She noticed the slight tremor in his hand as he adjusted his papers. He was anxious, likely aware that the noose was tightening around Croton and, by extension, himself. No doubt he wanted this case wrapped up before anything else could leak out. Simone slipped a small note to Felicia, signaling her to prepare for an unexpected development. The district attorney gave a tight nod. She had done her part, lodging a strategic objection to clear the way for Simone's final reveal. When court resumed, Felicia delivered her closing argument in a subdued manner, an odd choice for a prosecutor known for her fiery summations. She insisted that Simone had used excessive force and that Croton's injuries were evidence of more than simple self-defense. The jury listened, but it was clear her heart wasn't in it. Once she finished, Judge Harrington prepared to dismiss the jury for deliberation. At that precise moment, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom swung open, and a hushed silence fell as uniformed federal agents entered, dressed in crisp suits with stern expressions. Leading them was Special Agent Noah Ramirez, Simone's bureau contact. Harrington's gavel hovered in midair, his mouth slightly open. The entire gallery gasped in unison. "Judge Harrington," Agent Ramirez announced, "we are here to execute a federal warrant for the arrest of Robert Croton and his associates on charges of money laundering, racketeering, and conspiracy." He paused, scanning the stunned faces. "Also, for possible judicial corruption." The judge's face turned pale. This is an outrage. You have no jurisdiction here without my approval." Ramirez raised an eyebrow and presented an official document. This warrant was signed by the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. "Your approval is not required, Your Honor." The gallery erupted into chaotic murmurs. Croton jumped to his feet, stammering denials. Harrington looked as though he'd been struck by lightning. Before anyone could react further, Simone calmly rose and strode to the middle of the courtroom. "I can corroborate these accusations," she declared, her voice strong with authority. Ramirez nodded. "Miss Johnson, would you care to identify yourself for the record?" Simone locked eyes with Harrington. "Simone Johnson, Special Agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, currently on an undercover assignment investigating Robert Croton's illicit activities." She slid her hand into her jacket pocket and withdrew her badge, lifting it for the entire courtroom to see. A collective gasp echoed off the walls. For a split second, Harrington sputtered, his gavel clattering onto the bench with a finality that resonated throughout the room. Croton nearly collapsed in shock, his face contorted. Even Felicia Marks feigned astonishment for the jury's benefit, though she'd suspected something like this all along. "This is highly irregular," Harrington finally roared, trying to salvage his authority. "How dare you lie to this court?" Simone turned to him, her composure unwavering. "With all due respect, Your Honor, your repeated dismissals and attacks on my credibility forced me to conceal my identity until the right moment. I have tangible proof linking you, Robert Croton, and a network of individuals to corrupt land deals and financial crimes." Pandemonium erupted. The jury whispered in disbelief. Some spectators exclaimed, while others craned their necks to get a better look at Simone's badge. Harrington tried to pound his gavel, but a federal agent stepped forward, leveling a calm but stern look at him. The message was clear: "Don't make this worse for yourself." Ramirez ordered several agents to move toward Croton, placing him under arrest. 2 agents advanced toward Harrington, who was trembling with rage. "You have no right," he barked, but even as he shouted, the futility of his position was clear. He was cornered by the very law he had sworn to uphold. Simone gave a curt nod to Felicia, who solemnly watched the unraveling of the man she had once addressed as Your Honor. The district attorney stepped forward to collect the official documents from Agent Ramirez. Clearing her throat, Felicia turned to the stunned onlookers. "Members of the jury," she said, her voice steady and loud, "I believe we have new evidence to consider." She glanced at Simone, her expression filled with both apology and admiration. "Or perhaps the prosecution should move for a mistrial, given these extraordinary developments." Harrington let out a strangled sound. He was still wearing his black robe, but the respect it once commanded had disappeared. Croton, now handcuffed, spat curses and insults, promising revenge, but no one was listening. Simone stepped forward to address the gallery. "I regret the deception, but it was necessary to fully expose the scope of corruption in Pinewood County." She turned to face the judge directly. "And you, Judge Harrington, mocked me time and again, questioning my intelligence, my right to defend myself. You tried to silence me from presenting evidence. I only wish you had asked yourself why I was so persistent. Maybe then, you would have realized this day was coming." In the corner of the courtroom, Cole stood timidly, having crept in amidst the commotion. He met Simone's gaze and gave her a grateful nod, tears glistening in his eyes. The unmasking was complete. The air in the courtroom buzzed with the charged energy of retribution. Simone felt the tension in her chest fade as Harrington faced his downfall. And while her mission wasn't fully concluded, there would be depositions, arrests, and reams of paperwork. This was the apex of her month-long undercover operation. Justice, at last, was no longer a mere possibility. It was now a reality unfolding before every disbelieving eye in Pinewood County. One of the federal agents recited Harrington's rights as they prepared to escort him from the bench. The judge seemed on the verge of collapse, sputtering about legal technicalities that would never be heard in court. Meanwhile, Simone stood quietly, reflecting on the dramatic turn of events. Karma indeed had come calling, and it was swift, final, and unequivocal. In the swirling chaos of that afternoon, word spread across Pinewood County like wildfire. The once revered Judge Roland Harrington had been taken into custody, paraded in handcuffs from his own bench to a waiting black SUV, escorted by grim-faced federal agents. Photographers and local reporters rushed to the courthouse steps, capturing the scene that would become a regional headline for weeks. Judge accused of corruption arrested in stunning courtroom sting. Robert Croton's arrest reverberated in the days that followed. More warrants were executed, targeting the sheriff's office, certain council members, and well-connected business owners. Pinewood County's entire power structure trembled. Town residents flocked to the diner and barbershop, eager for information about the FBI's covert operation. They whispered about the black woman defendant who turned out to be a federal agent, an unshakable champion who refused to be beaten down by prejudice and corruption. Simone Johnson, her cover now lifted, was escorted out of the courthouse by Agent Ramirez. She was greeted with hushed awe. Many of the local court employees, who had once eyed her with suspicion, now looked at her with respect. Even Felicia Marks, who had pursued an assault conviction against her, offered a handshake and a quiet apology. The charges against Simone were swiftly dropped, and the entire case was nullified by the explosive revelations. She had never truly been the defendant in the first place. She had merely played that role to keep the criminals unaware. However, the real moment of karmic satisfaction came a week later during a federal hearing held in Richmond at the United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia. Harrington appeared in shackles, no longer wearing the black robe he once donned with such an air of superiority. Croton, his arrogance diminished, sat beside him. Evidence from Cole's flash drive was presented in damning detail: property deeds, bank transactions, emails referring to hush payments. The hearing was a formality to confirm probable cause, but the chain of incriminating data was so comprehensive that a grand jury indictment was practically assured. Simone testified with precision and steadiness, describing how she uncovered connections between Harrington's favorable rulings and Croton's under-the-table payments. She recounted the judge's courtroom conduct, his obstruction of her defense, and how it fit into a broader pattern of judicial misconduct. Harrington attempted to object, but the federal judge silenced him, explaining that he was now the one facing serious criminal charges and had no authority to interrupt. The irony was thick and bitter, a public reckoning for a man who had once thrived on humiliating defendants. Outside the federal courthouse, as cameras flashed and reporters clamored for statements, Simone stood tall, carefully selecting her words. She expressed gratitude to the townspeople who had the courage to come forward, from Miriam Perry to Cole, and commended Felicia Marks for her integrity in the face of mounting pressure. Simone acknowledged that while Pinewood's corruption ran deep, it was never too late for justice. The press seized upon her every word, framing her as a heroic figure who fought not just racism and prejudice but an entire corrupt system in Pinewood County itself. The vacant judge's seat became the subject of much speculation. The State Judiciary Commission would appoint a temporary judge until proper elections could take place. No matter who took that seat, however, the stain of Harrington's betrayal would linger. The locals began to reassess their trust in long-standing officials, asking tougher questions and demanding greater transparency. A small wave of reforms took shape, calling for citizen oversight committees and new campaign financing rules. Rumor had it that Miriam Perry might even run for a county clerk position. As for Simone, she had already moved on to the next phase of her FBI career. After packing up her motel room and bidding farewell to the safe house where Cole had found refuge, she drove back to Washington, D.C. One afternoon, she found herself standing in front of the J. Edgar Hoover Building, the FBI's headquarters, giving a detailed debrief to her superiors. They commended her for executing a successful undercover operation despite the immense personal challenges and humiliations she had endured in that courtroom. The final measure of karmic justice came when Simone received an update. Harrington, out on bail but disgraced, was spotted at a supermarket, wearing everyday clothes. His head hung low, his eyes darting as if expecting to be recognized and ridiculed at any moment. He had become a false idol in his own community, the subject of mocking jokes and outraged condemnation. He had lost everything: his position, his respect, and the illusions of grandeur he had clung to for so long. Meanwhile, Simone had earned the admiration of many, from Pinewood residents to the highest ranks of the FBI. It was a reminder that, in the end, no matter how high someone climbs, if they build their ascent on corruption, bigotry, or cruelty, they can, and often will, topple with stunning force. The very law Harrington had weaponized against others had finally come calling for him, guided by the unlikely defendant he had so derided. And perhaps that was the ultimate lesson for Pinewood County and for all who watched the drama unfold. Justice can arrive in the most unexpected form. Mockery might persist for a time, but truth will find its way. And for those who sneer at innocence and virtue, karma often isn't just a concept. It's a sentence, carried out in broad daylight as cameras click and the world bears witness. When Simone reflected on everything that had transpired in Pinewood County, she felt a sense of closure, as warm and comforting as the morning sun. She had faced mockery, prejudice, and an imbalanced court system. She had stood against a powerful judge and a manipulative businessman, and she had won not just for herself, but for an entire community ensnared in corruption. Back in Washington, Simone continued her responsibilities with the FBI, though her mind often drifted back to Pinewood. She remembered the hush of the old courthouse, the condescending glare of Judge Harrington, the whispered confessions of frightened locals. She recalled the righteous fury that surged through her veins each time the judge tried to silence her. But more than anything, she remembered the triumph of that moment when she revealed her badge, when Harrington's eyes widened in disbelief, and when karma finally struck him like lightning. The Pinewood case became somewhat of a legend at the Bureau, a testament to Simone's unwavering resolve. While some operations ended quietly, overshadowed by bigger headlines, this one captured the public's imagination. The story spread online, sparking discussions about judicial accountability, racial prejudice, and the heroism of standing firm against corruption, no matter the personal cost. Perhaps the greatest vindication, though, came from the simple words of thanks. She received a letter from Miriam Perry that arrived in Simone's office mailbox weeks later, expressing gratitude for illuminating a dark corner. "People here are starting to speak openly now," Miriam wrote. "They're not afraid like they used to be. It's as if a fog has lifted. Thank you for giving us our courage back." Simone read those words with a faint smile. She had done her job, her duty, yes, but also answered a profound moral calling. In the grand scope of federal operations, Pinewood might have been just a small piece of a much larger puzzle. Yet that little county's transformation was tangible. Real lives had been altered, real oppressors brought to justice, and a new era, however fragile, was beginning. In quiet moments, Simone recalled the tension in Harrington's courtroom. Every condescending remark had felt like a blow, but she also remembered that final day, the silence that fell over the room, the rapid thud of her heart as she stepped forward to reveal her true identity. She thought about how fleeting power could be. Harrington's entire empire of intimidation collapsed in a single, breathtaking moment, undone by the very laws he had sworn to uphold. And so life moved on. Court calendars were reorganized, new judges appointed, and trials resumed under less oppressive eyes. Pinewood County discovered it had voices that demanded honesty and equality in the halls of justice. No one forgot Simone Johnson. Some said her presence was like a cleansing wind, sweeping away the stale corruption and letting fresh air into the county. As for Simone, she carried the lessons of Pinewood with her. The next time she donned her undercover persona or walked into a potentially hostile environment, she would recall how swiftly a smug judge could be brought low by the truth. She would hold fast to the belief that real justice might be delayed, but it would never be denied. And if it required resilience, wit, and the cunning to endure the mockery of men like Harrington, she was prepared. Because the law, when wielded by someone of integrity, could topple even the most arrogant fortress. Those who had scorned her for being a woman, for being black, for standing up for herself, at the end of it all, they were the ones who fell. And that was how it should be. A promise fulfilled, a balance restored. If you were moved by this powerful story of resilience and truth prevailing over corruption, there's more to share. We've seen how one person's unwavering resolve can dismantle an entrenched system, how an ordinary individual can challenge authority and expose hidden wrongs. Simone Johnson's journey proves that each of us carries the power to pursue justice, no matter our background, no matter the odds. Now, I invite you to keep this spirit of courage and transformation alive. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel if you found yourself rooting for Simone and craving more stories of strength, justice, and hope. By doing so, you become part of a community that refuses to remain silent, that stands for integrity in every corner of society. Together, let's spread the message that truth and fairness still matter, and that we're all capable of being the spark that changes the world.